Okay, Congresswoman, you are live.
Welcome, everyone, to this town meeting. Now, this is a town meeting on our bipartisan infrastructure law, which we entitled The Road to Safety in the District of Columbia. Before I begin, I would like to bring you up to date on what has happened in the Congress thus far for DC. We're trying to take full advantage of being in the majority, having a Democratic House, Senate, and President. So let me begin and quickly go through what we've accomplished so far. As chair of the subcommittee on Highways and Transit, I helped pass the bipartisan infrastructure law we'll be discussing. And that includes funding for Metro and safer roads for all cars. The pending House and Senate fiscal year 2022 DC appropriations bills will increase, if passed, DC tuition access grant program annual awards from $10,000 to $15,000 in tuition, which would be the first increase since I got this program created in 1999. The House passed the DC statehood bill last year for the second time in 2 years. President Biden strongly endorsed the bill. It has a record 45 co-sponsors in the Senate. That's almost every Democrat. And the Senate held the second ever hearing on our DC statehood bill. There are 3 hurdles to passage in this Congress: the Senate filibuster, the opposition of Joe Manchin to the bill, the fact that 3 other Democrats have not yet co-sponsored the bill, but I intend to get them. The pending House and Senate fiscal year 2022 DC appropriation bills remove the abortion and recreational marijuana commercialization funding prohibitions, something we've been trying to get done for a number of years. I have defeated more than 20 bills and amendments that Republicans have filed this Congress to overturn local DC laws, including 6 on, of all things, DC vaccine policy alone. We secured retroactive funding for the $755 million that the then Republican-led Senate denied DC last Congress when it treated DC as a territory instead of a state for coronavirus fiscal relief, and got DC's treated as a state, city, and county for new coronavirus fiscal release, since, of course, DC provides each level of service. The House passed my bill to give the mayor control of the DC National Guard as part of the fiscal 2022 defense authorization bill. But Republicans kept it from being included in the version of the bill that was signed into law after all of our work. My bill allowing DC and the National Park Service to enter into cooperative management agreements to improve National Park Service parks, with Franklin Park being the first one to be rehabilitated under this bill. And finally, I have been ranked as the 7th most effective House Democrat last Congress by the Center for Effective Lawmaking, including the 2nd most effective non-full committee chair. I thought I would give you that rundown before we started. Now on to tonight's virtual community meeting on our bipartisan infrastructure law. Very much appreciate all of you who are attending. It's great. It's a good number of you. In this community meeting on road safety and the implementation of the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, we now call it the bipartisan infrastructure law. I'm so pleased to be joined by Sichasha Carlisle, the Chief Administrative Officer at the District Department of Transportation, DC Councilmember Mary Chey, Chris Laskowski, Legislative Director of DC Councilmember for DC Councilmember Charles Allen, Jennifer Cooper, a member of DC Families for Safe Streets, Ludwig Gaines, Executive Director of the Washington Area Bicyclists Association, and Jim Elliott, co-chair of the DC Pedestrian Advisory Council. In the first half of last year, over 20,000 people died in motor vehicle crashes in this country, the largest number since 2006. In the District of Columbia, 2020 was the deadliest year for crashes in more than a decade. We have also seen fatalities among road users who walk, bike, scoot, and use wheelchairs increased by more than 50% over the last 10 years. Safer roads are key to addressing this crisis. Just this morning, I joined with Secretary of Transportation Pete Buttigieg and the second gentleman, Doug Inhofe, to mark the increase of the nation's first national roadway safety strategy. Federal infrastructure policy has for too long prioritized speed for motorists over the safety of people in the communities that those roadways pass through. But we are moving away from that thinking. Passed by Congress and signed into law by President Biden last November, the bipartisan infrastructure law takes steps to reform federal and state road design standards, to prioritize the safety of all road users, all, not just those who use cars, especially those outside of a car, as a matter of fact. It includes reforms to ensure that planners and engineers identify and address the most dangerous roadways and intersections, and provides historic funding for roadway safety initiatives. The law is the largest long-term investment in national infrastructure in nearly a century, and it will deliver for DC. The first funds have already gone out the door. Beginning last December and over the next 5 years, DC will receive a total of $61 million in formula funding under the Federal Highway Safety Improvement Program for roadway projects to reduce deaths and injuries from motor vehicle related crashes, a 34% increase over previous levels of funding. DC will also receive $29 million for transportation alternative projects, such as pedestrian and bicycle facilities, recreational trails, and safe routes to school, and an additional $9.2 million in formula grants will augment DC's commercial motor vehicle safety efforts. That's a 74% increase in funding. DC can look forward to new and expanded competitive grant programs in the bipartisan infrastructure law that are anticipated to launch this year. The law includes the first ever Safe Streets and Roads for All programs. DC will be eligible to compete for $5 billion under the program to support its efforts to advance plans and projects to reduce crashes and fatalities, especially for cyclists and pedestrians. Through the first of its kind Reconnecting Communities pilot program, a $1 billion fund created by the infrastructure law will allow DC the opportunity to address longstanding racial disparities by repairing communities divided by dangerous high-speed highways. DC will also be able to apply for funds to modernize data collection systems to collect near real-time data on all reported crashes to enhance safety and allow U.S. Department of Transportation to understand and address trends as they arise, not after. The need for action on road safety in the District of Columbia could not be more clear. The bipartisan infrastructure law is an important vehicle for investment in safety for all road users, community connectivity, and addressing the tragic preventable deaths on our nation's roadways. I very much look forward to this evening. So I want to quickly now move on and introduce our guests. The first guest is Ms. Carlisle of the District Department of Transportation.
Thank you, Congresswoman Norton. Hopefully folks can hear me and see me okay. I'm very honored to be here. Good evening. Again, Congresswoman Norton, Councilmember Che, and my esteemed fellow panelists. And most importantly, I think the District of Columbia residents here tonight that we serve. My name is Sasha Carlisle. I'm the CAO here at the District Department of Transportation, otherwise known as DDOT. I am so excited to be with you tonight on behalf of Director Lott and DDOT to discuss the bipartisan infrastructure bill, or the bill, as the Congresswoman noted, we're now calling it. I will apologize up front if I'm a little bit sniffly. I have a little bit of a cold, but I couldn't miss this opportunity to connect with all of you on this incredibly important piece of legislation and how I think it will help us, and DDOT believes it will help us improve the safety of our roadways. I should also mention, and I'm very excited about this as well, that DDOT officially released our Move DC plan this month. This is our long-term transportation and mobility plan for the district. And within that, we set our goals and policies, and we identify strategies to meet those goals and policies. A key goal within that, and something I think that dovetails very importantly this evening, is to design and manage a transportation network that offers everyone safe and secure travel choices. In other words, our safety goal. And roadway safety is the cornerstone of how we as a district are going to achieve Vision Zero. Some of our federal programs supported by this funding include, as the Congresswoman mentioned, our HSIP program, or our Highway Safety Improvement Program. This year, DDOT alone is going to improve safety at 25 street locations. And if you think about that, Those locations are based on our standard formula funding. So what the infrastructure bill will help us do is to increase the number of locations and increase the programs and safety improvements we can do through that program. I also want to mention our Safe Routes to School program. This is a program that helps build those vital connections through sidewalk construction. Another program I think that will be very well supported through the additional funds provided in the bill. And at DDOT, we are actually prioritizing projects and programs that align with our Move DC goals and our Move DC plan. But we can't do that. We cannot do that at all if we do not have the resources. And through this funding, through the bill, and a huge thanks to Congresswoman Norton, who has fought tirelessly to get these funds, we will be able to beef up a lot of our roadway safety, our pedestrian safety, and our bicyclist safety. As many of you know, we develop every year a statewide transportation improvement program, also known as the STIP. So we have the bill and it supports the STIP. We have historically not received sufficient federal funding, as many states, to fully fund our programs within our STIP, including those important roadway safety programs. However, this bill, for the first time in many years, is helping us fill that gap between the federal funding we have received and the projects and programs we need to implement to reach our Vision Zero goals, and improve our roadway safety. I am very, very excited at this morning's newly released DOT vision for roadway safety. It's a huge step the Federal Department of Transportation is taking, and I think it's very much in alignment with the District of Columbia, our forward-thinking vision, and our own Move DC goals. Finally, I just want to say a big portion of this bill, as the Congresswoman mentioned, and is worth mentioning again, are the competitive grant opportunities provided to states and localities like us, including the Safe Streets for All, as well as a program that will allow localities, cities, and states to install hardening measures like bollards to prevent motor vehicle operators from injuring pedestrians and cyclists. This is a very important initiative to Director Lott and Mayor Bowser. And in fact, just today, DDOT put in concrete protections for cyclists on our 200 block of 15th Street Northwest. So this type of competitive grant funding is something we're very interested in, and hopeful that it will help us beef up our program there around the city. So I will close with that. Thank you so much, Congresswoman Norton, for having DDOT at this event, and I look forward to the discussion.
Well, thank you very much for that very enlightening presentation. We will next hear from Council Member Che, who is chair of the DC Transportation Subcommittee.
Good evening, everybody. I am Council Member Mary Che, and I do chair the Committee on Transportation and the Environment. We have oversight over a number of agencies, but obviously it includes the Department of Transportation. Now, per the latest estimates that I've seen, the district is slated to receive more than $350 million under the infrastructure bill to support various transportation initiatives. And that's, there are separate buckets of funding for other items. And I just do want to mention one thing that the Congresswoman mentioned, and Ms. Carlisle, you mentioned as well, these competitive grants. One can be for, as I wrote this down, communities divided by dangerous high-speed highways. I have tried to put forth, and I hope somebody will pick up on this. Hello, DDOT. In Ward 7, we could deck over 295 and link those communities that are separated by 295. And if we put in a proper decking over, we could actually have buildings on top, which is done in other places as well. But we would unite finally those communities that have been separated by 295. So just put that in your hip pocket, please, because I think that that's something that would be really wonderful to do. we're still waiting for guidance from the Treasury Department about how exactly some of these funds can be used. And I am in discussions with DDOT and the mayor about how we might proceed with those monies. One key eligible use and the focus of what we're doing today is to enhance safety of all of the district users, pedestrians, cyclists, people using scooters, and the safety of drivers. And as some who are in attendance today may know, in 2015, the mayor announced the launch of the district's Vision Zero, which aims to put an end to traffic-related fatalities and serious injuries by 2024, which now is just 2 years away. Unfortunately, traffic fatalities have actually grown since 2015 from 26 that year to 40 in 2021. Now, every traffic fatality is terrible, but it's deeply concerning that we're moving away from our goal and not toward it. So in 2020, the council passed the Omnibus Vision Zero legislation. It was the culmination of months of hearings and meetings between my committee and traffic safety experts and DDOT. And the policy changes in that bill, I think, are very thoughtful, comprehensive changes. And as some may know, one facet of the district's legislative process, however, is that we can't spend money that we don't have. We can't deficit spend. You're lucky over there, Congresswoman Norton. You can spend and spend, but we have to spend only what we have. We have to have a balanced budget. So I was greatly frustrated last year to find that the mayor's proposed budget didn't include any funding for Vision Zero. Instead, she proposed that we add certain automatic traffic enforcement cameras, but they weren't the cameras that we were seeking. And those cameras are going to produce a lot of money. Now, I did a little thing here. I thought it was quite clever. The mayor can't use that money. She couldn't use that money in the budget coming up and the budget before, because we don't know how much it is. So the chief financial officer wouldn't certify it. However, the council in the Budget Support Act could put something in there, which I did, saying that all of that money from the new cameras will go toward Vision Zero. And so we're going to have more money, but all of this is to underscore, and relating to this meeting tonight, that funding is such a critical part of getting our Vision Zero and roadway safety work off the ground. And we've been frustrated and the district residents as well in getting it off the ground because of lack of funding. So since the fall, the district has seen, as I mentioned, greater injury and death on our roads and greater dangerous behavior from drivers. And so we need to do more. And with this funding that we're going to get out of these new cameras, and with the funding that's going to come from the federal government, we're going to be able to do more. And I can't wait for that. So I want to see how the federal dollars might help us move forward with our work. I'm hopeful that the Treasury's guidance will be broad and allow these funds to be used for a range of different initiatives, big projects, but also the smaller ones like the cycle tracks and the bollards, as Ms. Carlisle mentioned, that sort of thing. There's more to this funding than just road safety. There are a lot of climate resiliency items in there too, and a lot of other things in the transportation sector, EV chargers, electrification efforts, and that sort of thing. But that's for another, maybe another panel, Congresswoman. But for tonight's discussion, I'm really keen to see how we can make more strides to making roadways safer for everybody. But money's really, really important. So I want to talk about the money. Thanks.
Well, thank you, Councilmember Shea, or should I say, Transportation Chair. That was a very helpful presentation. The next speaker is Chris Laskowski, who is the LD Legislative Director for Councilmember Charles Allen.
Thank you, Congresswoman, for bringing everyone here together tonight, and really looking forward to hearing some more about this federal funding. As Councilmember Che said, of course, Councilmember Allen would love to be here and sends his regards to everyone, but he did have a conflict tonight. So I've been asked to talk a little bit about the district's Vision Zero legislation that Councilmember Che talked a little bit about. This was a bill that Councilmember Allen introduced in 2019, and it actually part of the genesis of the bill. This is something we've been thinking about for a long time, and roadway safety is something we've been thinking about for a long time. But over the Easter weekend of 2019, Dave Salavesh was killed while riding his bicycle on Florida Avenue. He was an important member of the DC's biking community, and had been an advocate for safe streets for a long time, and was a friend of Councilmember Allen. But that same weekend, there was also a pedestrian killed by a car, and there was a driver killed in a separate crash, and both of those occurred in Ward 8. And it really spurred the council to action, I think. But it sort of also really underlined that road violence is something that impacts everyone, but as really with all of the ills in our society, it disproportionately impacts Black and Brown communities. And that's what we've seen in the roadway deaths. Every year are disproportionately on the eastern half of the city in wards 7 and 8. There's a lot of dangerous areas of the city, but that's where we see just a disproportionate number of fatal crashes and serious injuries. So what we wanted to do through the legislation was to kind of sort of push the Vision Zero program that, as Councilmember Che mentioned, had been in place for a while. Wanted to push that along with a little more urgency. And we have obviously a lot of violence in the city that the district is grappling with, and there are some, that for some of the violence in the city, there are a lot of complicated root causes and solutions. But the thing about roadway safety or roadway violence is that there's really pretty simple solutions, and we really know what the solutions are. And as it really dovetails with the topic tonight of this funding for infrastructure improvements, which was really the focus of the Vision Zero legislation. We can improve enforcement, we can improve education, but if we build streets and roads that force people to drive slower, to drive more carefully, that's what's really gonna save lives. And so these federal dollars are really coming at a good time. As Councilmember Che mentioned, well, we have a funding mechanism in place for the Vision Zero legislation, but there's always more that we can do, and there's always more urgency to build safer roads. So just a little bit about the Vision Zero legislation, and to add to what Councilmember Che noted, there's a lot of pieces to it, but what we think are the most important are those pieces that really force DDOT to focus all of its construction on roadway safety. So going forward, once the bill is funded, most public and private roadway infrastructure projects won't be able to move forward unless they can demonstrably be shown to implement a part of the Move DC plan that Ms. Carlisle mentioned, or to otherwise improve safety for bicyclists and pedestrians and scooter riders and everyone else outside of a car, or to increase equitable access to public transportation. Ms. Carlisle mentioned the recently updated Move DC plan, and that's always been a really ambitious document with lots of plans. The Vision Zero legislation will require that network is actually built. Vision Zero legislation will require DDOT to build sidewalks everywhere, to install high visibility crosswalks. It'll put stricter penalties in place for contractors who do not replace crosswalks after they complete their road work. Every time there's a crash that causes a fatality or major injury, DDOT will have to submit a report to the council explaining how they are going to make the the intersection or the roadway there safer, both in the short and long term. And it would require DDOT to identify some of the most dangerous intersections and corridors in the district and to clearly explain how each year in our capital improvement plan in the budget, mayor's budget submission, those dangerous intersections and corridors are being addressed. So all of that costs lots of money. And so I'm really looking forward to, and I know the rest of the council is really looking forward to learning more about the federal dollars that are coming, what they can be used for, how we can use them to support the requirements of the Vision Zero legislation, but also just to move much more quickly on a lot of the plans that DDOT has in place. There are a lot of really, really smart engineers dedicated to roadway safety at DDOT, and we need to make sure that we have the funding and the capacity to implement all of that great vision that we see at DDOT. So again, just want to thank Congresswoman for bringing everyone here tonight. Thank you for having me here, and we're really excited to learn more about the federal funding and to continue to work with all of our partners, with DDOT, with Councilmember Che, with Congresswoman Norton, and all of our federal partners, to ensure that this influx of federal funding really goes to the places where we think it needs to go to make our roads safer for everyone.
Well, thank you, Chris, for ably representing Councilmember Allen this evening. We will hear next from Jennifer Cooper of DC Families for Safe Streets.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I want to thank Congresswoman Norton and all the speakers and people attending today to address the important issue of road safety. My name is Jennifer Cooper. I'm a resident of Parkview, and I'm here today with DC Families for Safe Streets. We are survivors of crashes and the family and friends of those lost to traffic violence. It is our goal to share our stories and experiences and to advocate for an end to the unfettered rise in traffic death and injury. I know a lot of you have spoke from a more administrative distance, but my statement is a lot more personal. We say speed kills, but what does that mean? We're so desensitized to traffic violence that we accept it as a necessary component of our transportation system. But what if instead you had the image of a 300-pound football player charging at a 40-pound kindergartner? Would you be okay with your children navigating school hallways while avoiding an impact the 300-pound professional athlete? Probably not, but we tolerate even more dangerous encounters every day on our roads. The SUV that hit me while I was jogging in my Parkview neighborhood was traveling maybe 15 to 20 miles an hour. It seems slow, but I assure you that being hit at that speed is deeply traumatic. I was thrown a full car length and landed in a heap on the pavement. My thumb was broken. My body was scraped and bruised. I wanted to stand up, but I couldn't. I'd been punched in the stomach by an SUV. While the SUV sped away, 3 men standing on the corner came to my aid. One scooped me up off the road, another called 911. If not for their actions, I could have been struck by another vehicle. I received reconstructive surgery to repair my thumb and spent a month with 4 metal wires holding my thumb together, followed by 2 rounds of physical therapy. I don't think I realized the importance of thumbs before losing the use of mine. I couldn't put up my hair. I couldn't cut bread. I couldn't drive or bike, but I could still walk. And each time I walked to my appointments at Washington MedStar, I met another person harmed by traffic violence. A fellow neighbor on Lamont Street who was hit by a car and lost his leg. A family creating a memorial at the northeast corner of Wangari Gardens for a daughter killed in a crash. An engineer who now drives for Lyft as a result of a traumatic brain injury. I am one of the nearly 1,000 pedestrians and cyclists injured on the streets of Washington, D.C. every day. The number sounds absurdly high, but it is right there on the DDOT website. Over the past 5 years, There has been an average of 653 crashes involving pedestrians and 334 crashes involving cyclists every year in the district. 40 people lost their life on the roads of DC in 2021. I want to pause for a moment of silence for those killed and injured on our roads. And I ask you all to think about how your life has been impacted by traffic violence, and if you'd like to put a comment in the chat. Now, I've talked about the problem. Let's talk about solutions. According to MPD, there are 41 red light cameras, 8 stop sign cameras, and 81 speed cameras. And yet we are farther from Vision Zero than we were a decade ago. We cannot simply convert gasoline-powered vehicles to electric, install more cameras, and call it a day. Private vehicles must be slower and lighter, and there need to be fewer of them. Narrower roads and a network of interconnected sidewalks are the key. That means an increased ability to walk and bike both within and between cities. It means giving more space to bikes and pedestrians than cars. We need a transportation system with more walkers, cyclists, wheelchairs, scooters, buses, and microtransit. Fewer private vehicles and more safety features like automatic emergency braking. Dementia-friendly design is also essential. This is about road safety, but is also about climate change and planning ahead for the population over age 65 to double by 2050. We must also focus on improvements east of the Anacostia River, where there are more crashes and fewer safe routes for pedestrians. This includes walking connections with adjacent Maryland counties. I want to thank Congresswoman Norton for prioritizing complete streets, bike lanes, safe routes to schools, and accessible sidewalks. We agree that choosing to leave the car at home is key to equity. That means we need both sidewalks and places to walk, including more grocery stores east of the Anacostia River. We cannot ask people to walk if there are no stores, restaurants, and services within walking distance. We are also pleased to hear Secretary Buttigieg made a commitment to 0 deaths. I know the scope of the problem is large and it can seem intimidating, but we have the solutions. We just need to follow through on implementation. Each passing day of inaction leaves children, pedestrians, cyclists, and other vulnerable users in harm's way. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Ms. Cooper, for that truly moving and unusual real-life presentation, along with the policy that you ably discussed. Our next speaker is the Executive Director of the Washington Area Bicyclists Association, Ludwig Gaines.
Thank you, Congresswoman. And first and foremost, I must thank you for your leadership, for your very capable and able staff for arranging tonight's town hall and extending the invitation to WABA and myself as Executive Director. I am all of 2.5 weeks into the position, and it has been an incredible ride so far. I appreciate my fellow colleagues on the panel and the perspectives that they bring. They bring it with passion, which has my respect and admiration and commitment to work collectively in the future on issues that impact our community so well. I want to specifically say, and it's important to put this on the table, because not all elected officials do what they promise, but you care about the issues of road safety. That's so important to our region and to the district. You have fought to bring home the resources that help mightily, and in the future will help mightily in the efforts to move us where we need to be. I am a former elected official, former city council member, just by way of background, from Alexandria, Virginia. I served on TPB, chaired Policy Development Committee, and chaired COG's Street Smart campaign. So these issues are near and dear to me, and I bring that experience to WABA as its new executive director. I'll share a quick anecdote. The more that I think about these issues that seem to be continuing in a good way and in a not good way, so prevalent in public media, I come back to a line from one of my favorite movies that so many of us have watched and know, and that line is one that's been uttered by Oprah Winfrey in The Color Purple and made popular by the actor-director Tyler Perry. All my life, Harpo. All my life, Harpo. What does that mean? What did it mean in the movie? What does it mean to the issues that we're confronting in our own communities? And what it means as individuals and as a community, that this is our moment, that this is a line of demarcation when it comes to defining our streets and taking back our streets for pedestrians and cyclists. It is a line that says, not only it's our moment, that we have won the will and we have the power and the resources to change our conditions. And in part, that's what we find, that's what we found through, and we identify and recognize importantly through our leadership at the congressional level with Congresswoman Norton, and locally with Councilmember Che, leaders who are willing to step up and fight for what's most important for our communities. In the District of Columbia, nationally, we know, before I go to DC, that fatalities, bicycle fatalities are at an all-time high. In DC, those fatalities reach their highest level since 2007, with 40 traffic fatalities, despite there being less traffic on the streets due to the pandemic. Half of those came, I would remind everyone, in Ward 7 and Ward 8. So forefront and center has to be the question of equity in our collective thinking and in our solution making as we go forward. This emphasis is a must. It reminds us that driving behaviors is a problem, but it also reminds us, as had been mentioned, about the solutions, and that engineering is one of those solutions that is well within the realm of local government and DDOT. And I know that this is on their minds and in their planning. The fatalities that have happened are not random. They are people that we know. They are our neighbors. They're our friends. They're our coworkers. They're family members. For me, as I prepared for this, two names came to mind right away from articles that I had read and tragic incidents that I learned about. The first is DC cyclist advocate Jim Pagel, who last year was killed only hours after tweeting about unsafe roads. Jim was an avid cyclist and urban economist who was killed by a driver of a Honda Civic at the intersection of 2nd Street and Massachusetts Avenue Northwest. I say Jim's name to remember him, and I hope we all will say the name Jim Pagel. He's no longer with us, but his memory lives on. His death was preventable. I also think about the children who in our jurisdiction have been injured and killed. And one name that comes to mind is Peter Zeitskin, who was age 9, who was struck and injured by a speeding motorist on 21st Street Northwest. The blessing is that Peter survived his injuries. The tragedy that we should all remember is that his injuries were preventable as well as Jim's, who lost his life on the very streets that he worked to protect for all of the benefit of the residents of the District of Columbia. The statistics bear witness. These are no longer random occurrences, but the stuff that demands our attention and action, which is why we're all here gathered. The saving grace is that the resources and proper planning are what's in front of us, so that we can realistically do what the Secretary of Transportation, Mayor Pete, released in his statements today is 0 deaths, road safety, from the very Secretary of Transportation on this day. And the opportunity is for all of us to work together to make this happen. I'll share that it is incredible to have a congressional representative who puts her energy and the commitment of her office and position behind bills that will move us toward our ultimate goal of providing and ensuring that there are safer streets for all. And Congresswoman Norton, your support of the infrastructure bill is manifest. It speaks for itself, and it offers a tangible example of what can happen with public partnerships with our elected officials and committed groups, such as those represented in and out of government, in the communities as well. And it is really the stuff that will get us to where we need to be. I'll go quickly and say tangibly what this means. It's funding through TAP, through the Transportation Alternative Program, HR 3684, in coordination with localities. It will provide for public safety efforts that WABA is committed to. We have done it, and we are committed to working with our jurisdictional partners across the region and in DC in particular, and a very good partner in DDOT to provide the support to all of our partners who may have capacity building opportunities or challenges, to building the compelling cases for funding, to getting the money where it needs to be in the communities and areas that need it the most. And I will always be the one, as we all have done, to remind us of the equity necessities of our planning and programming. This funding will help expand bike share, construct new sidewalks and streetscapes, planning studies, walking and biking trails across the communities, intersectionalities and interconnectedness, as has been discussed a couple of times today, through CTC, Capital Trails Coalition, and the overlay that they're doing, not just in DC, but to connect with DC, Maryland, and Virginia. Trail system that is amazing, and the opportunity is there with the proper funding to make this happen. Great strides have been made, and no jurisdiction more in the region than the District of Columbia has done more to make this happen. So those efforts need to be applauded. There are other opportunities, and I will share those for future discussions. And I will also just note that the political will is there. The public statements are there. The time to put equity and resources in place to make these things happen for the communities that need them the most in the district, it's Ward 7 and 8. We've got to find a reason, a solution to why, of all the injuries and fatalities in the district, over 40% are in those 2 wards. This is a solvable issue, and one that WABA commits to provide our resources and talents in partnership with the district, with the Congresswoman's office, with our partners, with those who are like-minded. And I'm confident that this can happen. I'm excited in my new tenure to see this happen. We'll be pushing wholeheartedly and passionately. I'm a lawyer by training, Congresswoman Norton. I'm a civil rights lawyer trained at Howard University. And I was taught by by many and the late Justice Thurgood Marshall. When we dedicated his bust, I was student body president, and he said problems exist, and the question is, what are you going to do about them? So I'm here in partnership with all of you to find solutions and to gain the necessary resources so that we can turn the corner on these really pressing issues. So thank you again for the invitation, for the opportunity. And on behalf of WABA, I am delighted to join you guys.
Thank you very much. WABA Executive Director Gaines, you may be new to the position, but we never would have known that from your presentation. So we welcome you to the position and thank you for it. Now, I think we are at our last presentation. Last, but certainly not least for us, Jim Elliott, co-chair of the DC Pedestrian Advisory Council.
Good evening, everybody. I want to thank Congressman Norton's office for inviting me to testify tonight on behalf of the DC Pedestrian Advisory Council, a government body charged with advising the mayor, council, and district agencies on pedestrian safety and accessibility. The new federal funding provided by the Act is a once-in-a-generation opportunity for the district to transform its streets so they work better for residents and visitors. The PAC urges our elected officials, DDOT, and other leaders to make improving pedestrian safety, access, and comfort a top priority for funds from the Act. Pedestrian travel is involved in almost every DC trip and is the primary mode for more trips than any other. For the district to achieve its goals for safety, equity, public health, economic vitality, and sustainability, we need the pedestrian share to go up even further. Traffic fatalities have risen in 5 of the last 6 years in DC, and last year, 40 people died in traffic crashes, more than in any year since 2007. 17 were pedestrians and 2 were young children. The increase in serious injuries and fatalities has happened despite a decrease in traffic. Why? Because our streets are designed to prioritize motor vehicle speed and throughput over pedestrian safety and comfort. Motor vehicle speed affects both the likelihood of a crash and its lethality. At 20 miles per hour, the chance of a pedestrian dying in a crash is 5%. At 30 miles per hour, it's 45%, 9 times higher. Certain populations are especially vulnerable, including people with disabilities and older adults, a growing share of the district's population. Our streets shouldn't depend on traffic congestion to keep speeds in check. They should produce safe speeds and crosswalk yielding 24/7. They should be designed with children in mind who constitute 1 in 5 DC residents. Children should be able to navigate our city safely and independently as they grow older. If a child darts out after a ball or fails to apply their bike's brakes quickly enough, it shouldn't be a death sentence. Our streets should be designed for the many people in our city who do not drive. That includes people like me who have a disability, children, seniors, people with lower incomes, and many, many others. And they should be designed to account for the many types of trips people make. The vast majority of trips, over 75% and rising, are not commute trips and often short enough to be completed by walking or rolling. It's children going to school, older adults getting a prescription, people meeting up with friends, walking the dog, out for a bit of fresh air. This requires attention not just to the familiar safety countermeasures, as essential as they are, but also to factors that affect how comfortable and secure people feel on our streets. Good pedestrian scale lighting, buffer areas between the sidewalk and street, separated bike lanes, designated parking locations for bikes and scooters, shade trees, benches, and elements like streeteries and public art that activate the street and produce safety in numbers. I'll close by reiterating some of the specific funding requests the PAC has made in the past year, which we believe should be prioritized for Infrastructure Act funding. 1, redesign the district's streets to produce safe driving behaviors 24/7. Signs are not enough. automatic traffic enforcement can be effective, but is not a good long-term solution. We need streets where visual cues and physical traffic calming tell drivers to drive carefully, reduce their speed, and yield. Streets that communicate that the district's streets are not reserved for cars, but public spaces where pedestrians are welcome, expected, and prioritized. 2, address sidewalk gaps. DC's 2020 Vision Zero bill requires sidewalks on both sides of every DC street. To date, DDOT has primarily focused on the low-hanging fruit. With the Infrastructure Act funding, the district can take on more challenging projects. Develop a robust, proactive pedestrian infrastructure inspection and repair program that would result in all sidewalks and crosswalks being inspected and repaired on a cyclical basis. FHWA has provided specific guidance in the Infrastructure Act saying that funding recipients should prioritize repair and reconstruction projects that benefit non-motorized modes. 4, share information to increase understanding of and broad support for new infrastructure among the general public. Information sharing should be done more frequently using multiple languages and a range of tools. Finally, I want to encourage any district residents who are interested in making DC a more pedestrian-friendly city to attend one of our meetings, sign up for our listserv, or follow us on Twitter. Visit walkdcwalk.org for more information. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Mr. Elliott, for reminding us that there can be no discussion of transportation without discussing pedestrian safety. Pedestrians are an important part of transportation. Now we are open for questions from those who have been with us this evening. Staff, would you let us know?
Yes, our first question is from Richard, and he asks, how can the public obtain the 25 street locations on safety improvements and the measures contemplated at these locations?
Who's that question for?
I want to say it's for DDOT.
Hi, hopefully you all can hear me. So that's a great question. Some of those locations are currently identified. The staff has been ticking them off to me. That includes 5th and K Streets Northwest, 6th and Florida, Alabama Avenue Southeast, and Brooklyn, where we're doing a number of different locations. We're currently finalizing the entire list. It's done on a rolling basis, and we will definitely communicate that through the public. If you follow us on Twitter, that's also a good place to track our progress. And I'm not sure if folks, we recently completed speed humps. So those are a slowing mechanism for traffic at over 100 locations throughout the district. And we're tweeting pretty actively through the fall construction period. And that's another improvement, I think, that really helps support what folks were mentioning, which is designing our streets in a way that slows down vehicular traffic and allows, pedestrians and cyclists to use the roadways safely.
Thank you. Next question.
Our next question is from Carl Nash. And what is the district doing about traffic enforcement? Why isn't the district looking for parked cars from out of state that have outstanding fines and booting them until the owners pay?
Is that for DDOT or who is that for?
Can I take it?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Okay, this is something I've been focusing on, particularly with the Department of Public Works. Turns out they only have 6 people who are on the boot crew. They need more. The director, who has since stepped down as director, was not aware that we put money in for more, but I've also offered to suggest to them things that they could do. Our parking enforcement people have plate readers. So we should have the list of the most egregious violators, those with multiple tickets, red light running, high speed and all that. So that when people, the parking people are moving along and they read these plates, they should immediately communicate them to the boot and tow crew so that there is a consequence. Part of the reason that we have these folks who are repeatedly violating the law and getting caught on these cameras is because there's no consequence to them if we don't enforce the law. So I've been trying to, get DPW to do a better job there. I haven't had a lot of success so far, so I have to stay with it, but you're exactly right. There are folks coming into the jurisdiction here who just think it's, a speedway or that they can go through red lights and there is no consequence. And by and large, many of them are correct because there hasn't been a consequence, but that is definitely an area that needs attention and enforcement. So thank you for that question.
And if I could add, Congresswoman, another element, I think, as we think about getting cars and motor vehicle traffic to slow down, and this was mentioned by a few of my fellow panelists, is actually our automated traffic enforcement program. We did, through the budget, through Mayor Bowser's budget and council's support in passing the budget last year, increased that program significantly. We're adding 109 cameras this year, which we at DDOT believe, and there's actually great evidence that those cameras do slow down drivers. We're also replacing what was an aging infrastructure of our current cameras. That's about 128 cameras throughout the district. We have begun that work. We have installed around 10 cameras, and we're expecting to install a handful more this month. So that is a program where we do see evidence of drivers slowing down and traffic slowing down. And when traffic is slowing down, it has a reverberating effect on all drivers. And we know that if we reduce those speeds, we will see fewer serious injuries and deaths and hopefully get to that Vision Zero goal.
I will add too on the automated traffic enforcement. There's an interstate compact that district and Maryland and Virginia are part of that sort of requires each state to help enforce moving violations, but it's limited to tickets that are handed by a law enforcement officer in person. So if you get pulled over on 95 as a district resident and get a ticket from a Maryland state trooper, that would be covered by this compact, and district DMV would have to make sure you pay that before you register your car or renew your license. So it does not apply to parking tickets. It does not apply to any of the automated enforcement. There's been some attempts. I know the mayor's office has had some initial conversations with their counterparts in Maryland, Virginia, but the Transportation Planning Board as well, which is our regional transportation planning body, has endorsed ATEs as an important enforcement mechanism, in part because it takes law enforcement out. There's not a interaction between law enforcement and a driver, but that has also sent a letter from the TPB to Mayor Bowser and to the governors of Maryland, Virginia, encouraging them to come to an agreement for interstate reciprocity on ATE violations, which I think will be hugely important to get to, as Councilmember Che noted, this perception that there really is no consequence for violating those speed cameras. And
Thank you.
I'm sorry. I would just jump in and co-sign the comments of Chris and Sasha in recognizing the effectiveness of the ATE program, scaling it up and making sure it's done equitably. Thank you.
Thank you. Next question.
Okay, our next question is from Margaret, and it is for DDOT. And she says, I understand that installing a new bike lanes takes extensive community engagement, but where there is an existing bike lane, what are the barriers from upgrading them to make them more safe? For example, the bike lanes on R Street Northwest were recently repainted. Why couldn't the parking lane and the bike lane have been swapped so that the bike lane is closer to the curb? from my perception as a biker and occasional driver, inside bike lanes are safer?
That's such a good question. And I'll start by saying two things. One, I am a cyclist, an avid cyclist, and actually I've lived in DC for 13 years and bike to work every day, almost 365 days a year. So I live in that world. I live in the world of a pedestrian, and I live in the world of a motor vehicle driver. I still have not figured out how to get home from the grocery store with all my groceries on a bike. But if folks have tips, I appreciate that. And two, the roadway design is both very tricky technically, but also it requires us to engage with all members of the community. And Mr. Gaines mentioned equity, and I think that's so important. Equity is really ensuring equal access to all of our transportation options. And I will say at DDOT, we have work to do. We're working hard and we have work to do through our many mobility programs. But there are neighborhoods where it's difficult to remove all the parking and access for those residents. And there are actually roadway geometry issues that don't always necessarily let us put a bike lane right against the curbside versus on the other side of the parking lane. So the devil's in the details. And I think the important thing is that we continue to engage with the community. Our engineers go to a lot of public engagements to talk folks through the specifics as they might relate to that project. Unfortunately, I can't answer specifically to that project right here, but I think if you shoot us a question, I have a staff member on, we can make sure we get that to our engineering team and get you an answer.
Thank you. Next question.
Our next question. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I just wanted to add to that and just say, when separated bike lanes are concerned, it's especially important to engage people with disabilities in the conversation. People with disabilities are both bicycle riders and pedestrians who are trying to get places to bus stops, et cetera, often have difficulty or may have difficulty in the case of a separated bike lane. So that's very important.
Thank you. Next question.
Our next question is for Councilwoman Che. And what are your thoughts as to why Vision Zero results seem to be going in the wrong direction? Are there certain components that need to be revisited or revised before adding more funds to it? I understand there's an ongoing audit which may shed light on that. When do you anticipate the results of that audit?
Well, we can ask DDOT about this as well, but you know, you can have goals and you can say Vision Zero and you can say 2024 and you can do all of that, but unless you put the pieces in place, you're not going to achieve your goal. And so one of the reasons why we've been so keen on figuring out resources and money is because we do have methods to improve safety, whether it be, you know, the crosswalks that are highlighted or bump outs or limiting right turn on red, because we've already found out that when you make a right turn on red, sometimes the driver is unsighted and a pedestrian walks into the walkway and they're hit. There are lots and lots of things we can do, but we have to pay for them. In addition, it's not all just engineering. I do think that, and this goes back, of course, but it's been exacerbated by the pandemic. You know, the speeding that's going on in the district is actually appalling. And I think that when the roads were a bit emptier, people were thinking that they were speedways or they could go as fast as they could. And I want to say something about those automatic traffic cameras. I love those cameras, the red light cameras, the speeding cameras. But unless people who are speeding and running the red lights pay the consequence of the citations that they're sent, we're only doing half of our job. So there are a lot of reasons why we haven't been able to achieve our goals. But by the way, I want to say also places like Philadelphia and other cities, they also have these objectives and they have been having trouble achieving their goals as well. It has to be a concerted effort. It has to involve education. It has to involve engineering. It has to involve enforcement of laws that we have. We have to bring it all together. And when we do, if we slow down the speed, if we think about the District of Columbia as not, a raceway for people, all over to get downtown or wherever it is they're going, but rather we're a community and we're a neighborhood. And we need to think of it that way, and the protection of, our children. Somebody talked about, safe routes to school. We've had safe routes to school for a long time. I live over here in Forest Hills. One of the things about safe routes to school is that we would have contiguous sidewalks. I'm on one side of Connecticut Avenue and Murch Elementary is on the other side of Connecticut Avenue. And after all the years of safe routes to school, guess what? We still don't have contiguous sidewalks for the children to walk on. That's appalling. And maybe it's money, but it's also, a commitment, to actually do these things when we do get the money. So to the person who puts the question, I can't pinpoint one thing. There are a variety of things, and therefore there have to be a variety of solutions.
Next question.
Yes, our next question is from Wendy Glenn. What can the district do about the out-of-state scofflaw drivers who owe the district millions of dollars in unpaid tickets and who also bog down our community parking spaces with out-of-state tags?
I think we did address this a little bit, and it's a matter of enforcement. We have been working or hoping to work on the reciprocal relationship with our jurisdictions. We have it for those citations, as Mr. Laskowski said, that are given by a police officer and carry points. We have reciprocity for that. And so if you get the ticket in Maryland and you're from here, or vice versa, we're going to pursue it across jurisdictions. We don't have that for traffic cameras. I just had a communication from somebody in Montgomery County, how they want to have reciprocity on their automatic traffic enforcement, but he said that they only want to do it with jurisdictions that have the same level of fines as we have. Unfortunately, and I'm going to say this, unfortunately, our fines are too high. They're way too high. Data shows that you don't need them to be that high. More than the amount of the fine is the certainty of enforcement. And all the high fines do is, particularly people, now of course everybody should follow the law, but particularly people of low income, it crushes them with these fines, which then double in 30 days. So what I would like to suggest is that we lower the fines and we increase to as much as to 100% as we can, the enforcement. And if we can get reciprocity, we'd be on our way to do that. And as I said, this office holder from Montgomery County is talking to me about that, but we can't agree on that if we have to have the same level of fines, because those are way, way too high.
Just one thought on the parking spaces on streets. I can tell you that I used to work in the service industry, and a lot of the people who work in the service industry do not live in the District of Columbia. The metro does not run late enough for people to be able to get home. So if we're worried about parking spaces, an easy solution would be to extend metro, to create better ways for people to bike between Virginia and DC and Maryland and DC safely, and to add bus routes. And that is really the crux of the problem, is that there's not options for people besides driving.
Can I say something? There's something in the chat here that caught my attention. It says, traffic enforcement is only good for very small sections, because once people figure out where they are, then they carry on with their bad behavior after that. I just want to tell you about a wonderful officer that we have over in the Palisades. There are traffic speed cameras, on MacArthur Boulevard and various other places. What he does is he sets up about, a quarter of a mile past them and catches them when they speed up after they think they're through the zone for the enforcement camera, but he's waiting for them there. So some of our officers, are onto this behavior and have been pursuing it. Obviously not everybody, but I just wanted to give kudos to that officer for his clever understanding about how people just speed up after they're past the zone of the camera.
Next question.
Okay, and these two questions are related, so I'm gonna ask them together. These are from Wendy and Daryl. It says, will the infrastructure money be used to install a flyover for the traffic entering on I-295 from Suitland Parkway heading downtown? This appears to be missing but badly needed in the design. Also, what can be done about the amount of debris that is being thrown from cars traveling on Suitland Parkway?
So I will try and answer that as best I can. I'm not totally sure I understand the specific ask of the first question. I will say that we will be looking, and we're currently looking at improvements on I-295. It's in our current portfolio, and I'm happy to hear more about the commenter. On the second piece, the Department of Public Works, our sister agency here in district government, actually is in charge of roadway cleaning. If there are issues in terms of folks seeing a lot of debris on the roadway, I definitely encourage them, reach out to 311. Feel free to tweet DDOT and DPW on Twitter. And those can be some really great ways to notify us. I do know that they do periodic sweeps. I won't speak too much for them. I don't work for that agency, but hopefully that helps answer the question.
Thank you. Next question.
Yes, our next question is again for Councilmember Che. Will your committee take up DDOT's capacity to engage communities and to actually take account of ANSY's great weight motions? Ward 2, particularly North DuPont, has become frustrated by DDOT stonewalling, or in the case of the 17th bike lane, failure to consult before the final decision was implemented. As importantly, why does MPD appear to do no traffic enforcement contrary to the bus shelter ads it's posted recently?
I didn't catch the last part, but I'll address the first part. There's been a lot of controversy over there in DuPont, particularly among certain commissioners. They don't want a bike lane over there. And there's been a lot of, kind of talk about it. I have encouraged DDOT to engage with that community as much as possible. And which is what the best thing I can do. And I think to a large extent they have. So I don't want to fault them on that. But in any case, could you repeat that last thing that you asked about?
Yes, it says, why does MPD appear to do no traffic enforcement contrary to the bus shelter ads it's posted recently? Not sure what they're referring to. If the constituent who answered that question could put maybe another sentence or so with what the last part of your question is asking, that would be great. Thank you.
Thanks, because I don't know what that means so far, so.
Okay, next question.
Our next question is from Amber, and it says DC is one of the just 14, DC is just one of the other 14 states that charge vehicle registration fees by weight. We know heavier and taller vehicles are more dangerous to those who are outside of the vehicle. What legislation is being worked on at the federal and maybe DC levels to increase fees and expand regulations restricting larger, heavier, and more dangerous vehicles?
Is that for me? I don't have any initiatives on that front. I don't know if DDOT is focused on that.
I think that's a hard question to answer. Well, why don't we move on? Go ahead.
As far as I know, we are not specifically drafting legislation related to vehicle weight, and I won't speak to the federal legislation.
Well, I certainly don't know that we've taken any steps at the federal level. Does anyone else have anything to say on that?
I would just say that we definitely support encouraging people to have smaller vehicles. The larger the vehicle, the more dangerous the impact is. The fact that many of us were hit by SUVs, and it really does make a difference. I know that over the past several years that cars are becoming increasingly safe for the occupants, but increasingly unsafe for people outside of the vehicle. And one of the primary reasons is vehicle weight.
If I could just say, I think Jennifer made such an important comment. And I think the key factor is encouraging the use of non-single occupancy vehicle travel. And really making sure we're investing in building out our mobility networks. This is actually really key for DDOT. If folks are hopefully flipping through Move DC after this meeting, you'll notice one of our key initiatives is to increase those mobility options. Like our bus priority network is a really great example of where we're investing in the roadway to make sure bus travel is faster and safer and more efficient. And our hope is we're going to drive, no pun intended, folks to want to take the bus more and more and really get people out of those single occupancy vehicles. I don't know anyone who likes to sit in traffic. And so I think as we push towards that goal, we'll lessen that. And we will also help to help that specific problem as well.
Well, this is a very important question because it comes at a time when climate change is at the top of the list. The larger the vehicle, the more interference with climate change. And yet people feel safer in larger vehicles. So your notion of having more than one person in a vehicle might be just the thing to do. Next question.
Yes, our next question is from Richard to DDOT. All of this new funding is excellent news, but DDOT's personnel is limited. Is DDOT willing to make a commitment to prioritizing infrastructure measures that improve cyclist and pedestrian safety over all other measures?
Yeah, so it's a